everyone. As Patrick was just saying, my name is Alex Singh. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey. But what's more relevant for this conversation is for the last 4.5 years, I've led QuantumBlack, which is McKinsey's artificial intelligence and data arm for the firm globally. And so as you can imagine, the last 4+ years have been pretty fantastic, but the last 2 years have been a bit nutty in terms of the amount of global travel talking about these topics. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about how do you actually get the full potential of AI and GenAI, right? Is it hype or is it reality? And what does that really mean for us? And so let me just tell you, when I've had probably a couple hundred, 400 or 500 CEO and board conversations over the last 2 years or so as GenAI came about. And one of the initial questions was always like, you know, what is GenAI? Is it hype? Is it reality? And so forth. And I think that was a legitimate question a year and a half ago people were having. Today, I would say it's absolute reality. And we'll talk a little bit about, you know, having had these hundreds of conversations, what are some just observations cross industry, across the globe, but also in telcos in particular. And in every conversation now, there's tons of questions, but I've oversimplified it to basically 6 questions people end up asking, and it's all in the context of how do I launch and scale? As I think many probably have experienced, there's always this hype cycle of technology. And then the question is, do people really launch and scale the solutions? And so all the questions now on AI and GenAI that I push for is, are you thinking about launching and scaling, or are you just talking about doing pilots? And so questions revolve around 6 topics pretty relatively quickly. One is, what is the opportunities? What are the opportunities in my business against my competition in this core part of the BU, in this region or geography? It is no longer at this amorphous level of opportunities. It's not about, you know, writing a poem for your kid's birthday party over the weekend, but specific business opportunities that are actually going to be differentiating from what people can do today. The second question is, because there's so many opportunities and everyone within organizations are talking about this, the question is, how do I organize myself and govern this thing called AI? Organizing yourself is not a trivial task. It sounds easy, but oftentimes what's happening, particularly with GenAI, every part of your business is experimenting and playing and different people are doing things. That's usually not the great way to success. It's not about thousands of flowers blooming, but how do I organize and govern ourselves? The third thing that I think is different than AI in the past, and I would say it's more on steroids now, which is, how do I partner with and how do I partner? This is a complicated ecosystem, right? We just had AWS up on stage, and whether it be the cloud providers, Azure, AWS, GCP, whether it be the data providers like a Databricks, or whether it be the LLM players, OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, whoever it might be, and then you have all these consultants, other people running around. How do I navigate all these partnerships I'm going to have? Because I think it's pretty clear no one organization is going to have the capabilities in-house for the long term. They could have them at one point in time, but I think they'll get outdated fairly quickly. Unless you're one of the huge hyperscalers or so forth, I think it's really, really hard to maintain that level of talent and that level of, you know, on top of the change that's occurring. So how do I think about that partnership? The fourth, which for any of you organizations that are a publicly traded company or have a board, the topic of risk is a topic that always gets brought up. Risk was always a topic with AI, but now it's front and center for the CEO, the top team, and the board. In every conversation, I can't have a conversation without people talking about risk. They used to talk about it in the old world of AI, but it was like 2% of the conversation. Now it could be the very first question that people ask, which is, how do we manage risk while we're trying to create value, right? Every CEO or top team says, I know I don't want to be in the bottom half and be the laggard, be the next blockbuster that gets eaten alive, but I also don't want to be so fast out of the gate that I blow up my organization. I have a data breach. I lose customer trust. I do something that really limits my organization and pushes me back, right? That's the jokingly comment is, no one wants to go to a dinner conversation, a cocktail conversation, and be the CEO or the board of a company that just screwed up because of risk on AI. Talent and tech stack implications. Unfortunately, before and a little bit still today, some players talk about the fact that, like, don't worry, AI and GenAI is going to like solve all your tech stack implications. It's going to magically find your data. It's going to pull it together in a simple way. It's going to provide you every answer you want to know with a drop of the hat. It's just not true. it has real tech stack implications. It's one thing to do something in a lab. It's another thing to do things at scale. And if you want to do things at scale, your technology stack matters. Who your cloud provider matters. How do you work with them and manage them matters. And so tech stack implications are real and talent implications are real, right? For your existing talent, we all know, what will that mean for how do I think about my hiring in the future? Well, I need as many contact center reps as I'm, automating a whole host of my chat bots and my conversations I'm having with my customers. Or will I not, right? How many do I need to hire going forward? And what level of talent do I need going forward, right? Are data scientists and data engineers exactly what I used to hire before? Or do I need something different? Do I need these prompt engineering people into my organization? So talent becomes a really critical question around how to go after this. And as you can imagine, it's supply constraint, right? The best people, I talk about these people as being 10Xers. The very best people in this field are worth 10 times the amount of the next 10 people. And so finding those 10Xers is critically important. They will change the game for your organizations. And then lastly, the question is always like, how do I get going? I need to get going. Where do I start? How do I prioritize? How do I fund this thing? And what's really important is, if you think about it, at the end of the day, the CEO often has to be in the driver's seat on this stuff, because to get going requires the business, technology, your AI organization, HR, finance, legal, risk, to kind of all come together. And that usually only sits with one person, that's the CEO. And so how do I get going? So oversimplification, dramatic oversimplification purposely, but 6 key questions that people ask about launching and scaling. But I do think it is reality. It's not just a hype cycle. So what is 88%? So we survey a whole bunch of companies, and what we find is, 88% of the companies say they attempt to do a digital and AI transformation. So everyone will claim they're trying to do an AI transformation. 75%. What does 75% mean? 75% means is when we ask them is how's it going? They say, not so good. 75% of them say they've had a meaningful stall during their digital and AI transformation, and that's nicely worded. What that really means is, this is taking a hell of a lot longer than I ever thought. It's cost me way more money than I ever thought, and I'm not seeing any value. So it's like negative ROI, right? I'm spending a bunch of money, I'm spending a bunch of time, and I'm not seeing the value that the investment thesis actually came about. So people are super excited, lots of failures, lots of dead skeletons around this journey. And it's not just Gen AI, obviously, this is digital and AI over the years and years. So what do you do about it? So what we did was we looked at over 200 or so companies that successfully did digital and AI transformations. And what we did was we looked at and said, okay, what do these companies have in common? What's working for them? And we wrote a book on it. The book is called Rewired. It's a New York bestseller, but we wrote this book called Rewired, and we basically took the playbook and published the playbook. And I'll walk you through the 6 things that matter. The very first thing is setting an aspiration, an aligned aspiration, prioritizing, and having a clarity around your value roadmap. It sounds so simple. It sounds so simple. I go to so many companies in which you ask the top team, what is the top 3 things you're going after in this space? You will literally get you'll get as many people as you ask, you'll get different answers. You ask them the question, what will happen if the market turns and you see a meaningful slowdown in revenue? Will you continue to invest or will you pull back? You'll get dramatically different answers. And so getting that aspiration in terms of what is the outcome in the next 3 to 5 years they're targeting for, how are they going to fund this? Where are they going to prioritize they're going after? And do they have clarity on how value is going to get created over the next at least 12 to 24 months? I think a roadmap that says 5 years out is as good as the piece of paper it's written on. But for the next 12 to 24 months, have some perspective of where value is going to get created. And so aligning the top team, dramatically important. The middle bucket is all around capabilities. So when we looked at these companies, they had a set of capabilities that, were pretty darn good. They had talent. They had tech talent, and they also had business talent. They had change management talent, right? They had people that actually knew how to work with tech and business together. And the tech talent matters a lot, as you all know. And so they had real talent. The third thing is they had an agile operating model. This wasn't like tech for tech's sake, throw it over the fence. Our technology organization will figure it out. Don't worry, our CDO will figure it out. Our business will figure it out. They had an agile operating model where technology, business, the AI organization, finance, legal, risk, HR all came together with data science, data engineers, scrum masters to solve a specific business problem. I mean, we've all talked about agile operating model for decades, right? But those who do that really, really well and those who say they do that are two very, very different things. And we saw that in spades when we looked at the 200 plus companies that were successful. The third is technology and tooling. Sounds basic. Everyone's got technology and tooling. There is a difference, which is who really has aligned themselves with their tech stack. They're not fragmenting out these decisions across the businesses, even when they're in a fragmented organization. But there are certain decisions that need to be centralized, and those decisions matter. And they matter not just to solve a solution, but they matter to solve a solution cost effectively, which I'll always talk about, not just building a solution. Whenever someone says I built a solution, I ask two questions. Fantastic, great, good step one. Two, how much has it scaled and got adoption? Are you seeing that across the board? And what is your cost to do that solution? Oftentimes, cost is prohibitive from scaling it to a larger organization. And technology and tooling help make that cost effective. And then fifth, which is, should be no surprise, data is the elixir for impact in this world. Data matters, right? So data management matters, organizing your data, governing your data. None of this stuff is sexy, but it's so absolutely critical to have real impact, is managing your data, which is a lot harder than it sounds, because oftentimes people view data as information, as kind of information and leadership. So they house data, they hold it. Business units hold data. They don't give it to the organization, or they manipulate it in different ways because it makes sense for their particular business. But the data is actually the enterprise's data. So how do you actually think about enterprise level data that can be leveraged across the organization? Critically important. And then last is adoption and scaling. And while it takes up a third of the page, for those 75% of companies that struggle, I would say that's 2/3 of the reason they struggle is adoption and scaling. It's not a tech problem, not always a tech problem. It's really interesting, right? If you look at any major use case that has real value, at some point, some human has to do something different, whether that be your employee, your customer, your agent, whoever it might be. Somebody has to do something different. And changing human behavior is the hardest part. Like, that takes real work and real effort to get people to change how they operate day to day and why they should leverage these tools. And so adoption and scaling, I think, is one of the things that we really harp on a lot. Top team alignment, bunch of capabilities in the middle, and then very much focus on adoption and change management and scaling. And so when we looked at those two companies, they unequivocally have some components of these six. By no means are these companies like distinctive on all six, but they've, whether it is purposeful or unpurposeful, they tackle all six in some form or fashion. And so we think of this as the recipe of rewiring your organization for success on a digital and AI transformation. So let me flip over to GenAI for a second. We also did a bunch of research on what's the value of GenAI on top of all other technologies that exist around the globe. And, McKinsey Global Institute did some real math around it and came up with some really big numbers, which I think are relatively irrelevant. What's actually relevant is, at the end of the day, 80% of the value came from 63 use cases. Just think of that. 80% of the GenAI lift relative to other traditional technologies came from 63 use cases. Not 500, 63. And those 63 purposely, I simplify into these 4 buckets. The first one is concision, virtual expert, co-pilot, whatever name you want to use. How do I take a bunch of information, synthesize it, and put a little expert on somebody's shoulder to make them do their job better, right? I can upskill them much faster. I can take a first year or second year person, knowledge worker, and make them feel like they're a 7th or 10th year knowledge worker. So I can upskill them much faster. Their proficiency becomes much better. I lower my hiring costs because people actually stick around for a longer period of time. The second is coding and software. Relative no-brainer in my view. I don't know an organization on the planet who's not upgrading legacy code to modern code. GenAI can be super helpful in that process. It does not mean, I often hear people say, well, what's the uplift? I say, well, depending on how you think about it, 25 to 50% you see productivity uplift. And the answer that I very quickly follow with, that does not mean you can get rid of 25 to 50% of your people. Absolutely not. It's a portion of what they do and they get better at it. The third is creative content. This is the marketer's dream, which is how do I create, full-scale marketing campaigns leveraging generative AI. There's a lot of experimentation going on in that area. As you could imagine, there's copyright and IP issues that come along with that. But creative content is at the, kind of the marketing campaign is the one end of the spectrum. There's another end of the spectrum, which, simple analogy, but I tell a lot of CEOs this because they can associate with it, which is, how can I have them just create an email response to customers that send you emails directly? A lot of our retail clients, I give the CEOs a lot of respect, will literally reply to customers that email them directly. I can create a GenAI machine that just provides them, that response, that has legal authorization, that has all the other risk mitigation things around it. They, of course, can read it over, but that's as simple as it can get. And then customer engagement, which in your old world, I think matters a lot. The contact centers, the call centers is the simple example. And so big number in terms of opportunity from GenAI, important numbers to remember, 63 use cases, 4 major buckets of where they fall. So what does this all mean for telcos? 2 things on why I think telcos are really going after, at least in my conversations, AI and GenAI much more aggressively. And that is, there are real pressure points for the industry. There continues to be margin pressures remain. And while the competitive environment also keeps costs down. So margin pressures remain. I can't just increase willy-nilly. Promotions used to be a big way to gain speed. But the challenge is everyone can replicate that in a heartbeat. And so you see this competition around promotions and the replication of that happening at lightning speed. Network performance, just to name one more, which is, the quality and speed used to be the differentiator. That's just not as differentiating as it was in the past. And so there's just some systemic things happening in the telco space in general that are driving people to think differently. And then the second thing is your customers and employees are also expecting more, right? So I think earlier our colleague who spoke earlier, right, talked about personalization. Absolutely, we see the exact same thing. Personalization expectations are flying through the roof. And so the more personalization will drive greater individual behavior. Price is becoming just as one of, if not the most important factors often. And then there's a new normal on employee expectations, right? As you would imagine, right? Employees, the difference with AI before and Gen AI today is everyone's using Gen AI, right? The reason I always jokingly say OpenAI, ChatGPT just took off so fast was because whether you were like 8 years old or 80 years old, everyone could use it. The interface was so easy. And so now people's expectations, their employees and your customers' expectations is that's how you should interact all the time. And so you have to think of, industry systematic issues and then customer needs are changing. And so what does that all mean? Which is to win, telcos are thinking about how does AI play a much, much bigger role and what's their role in the AI value chain. And so what I'll hit on is 3 potential ways that we think about where telcos can play. One is AI for the core. How do you embed AI in your operations, in your customer experience? The second is AI as a service, which is, as I build capabilities as an organization, as a telco, can I actually leverage those capabilities and sell them as a service as a service to my B2B customers? And then the third is AI as a consumer solution, a little bit further out there. That takes a lot more one-to-one, hand-to-hand combat with hundreds, if not millions of customers one-to-one. I'll hit on the first 2 a little bit more in depth. So when we think about a telco, and some of this you saw a little bit on the AWS side as well, we basically break down the telco into seven domains. 6 of the 7 domains, quite frankly, every industry, every client will go after 6 of the 7 of these. There's one that's really telco specific. But what's important here is these are not pie in the sky. People are doing this today. People are doing this today in the telco space and in other sectors. And so I'll just hit a couple of them. The marketing and sales, hyper-personalization, we talked about that, so I won't harp on it. The second one around reimagine proactive service, I think this is a way you can wow your customers. And we're seeing this already occur in the retail space, which is anticipate issues and do proactive reach outs. In the insurance space, any of you have homeowners or auto insurance, you probably saw your bills skyrocket. So what were people doing in the insurance space? They're proactively calling customers and explaining to them why they're going to get a bill that's much higher than it was before, versus sending a bill that's 30% increased and then taking a very angry phone call on the back end. So how do you proactively leverage your data and your information to identify challenges before they happen or as they're happening? Network Wi-Fi dropping in my house is living hell because I have 3 children, 18, 16, and 13. All within 2 seconds will let me and my wife know the Wi-Fi is down. And I'm sure you all experience the same thing. 1 second for one of the kids, 2 seconds for the other two. But the faster you could actually identify the potential limitations in someone's area and either reboot the modem and or give them a heads up, helpful. Frontline productivity. So, a lot of what's happening here is actually being leveraged from other sectors, which is, can you think about scheduling maintenance more efficiently? Lots of people go into the field. Lots of that maintenance work is not so helpful, right? I give you a 4-hour window for maintenance. They don't even come within the 4 hours. How can I do much better maintenance scheduling for their customers? That's something that if you think of like the FedExes and the UPSs of the world, Amazon's much better at it. Those learnings are being ported over to the telco sector as well. And I'll just hit on the last one I'll just hit on is letter E, which is the network, which is the telco specific one, which is all around self-healing and self-optimizing your network, right? So how do you leverage AI in your antennas to really start to think about dynamically turning them off and on, depending on frequency bands, saving energy, giving people the access they need when they need it, when there's going to be a spike? How do you start leveraging AI even to enhance that even further? So a bunch of areas across the telcos. And again, none of this is pie in the sky. It's AI in the core of the business. The second is AI as a service. This is a little bit next step out there, but you can think about AI services to your B2B companies. So let me give you for example, where the telcos are excelling is in the contact center, at least what I see. If you think about the contact center, your chat bots, the voice-to-voice you're having with your customer service rep, many of them are being fed with a GenAI machine next thing to say. It's absolutely being increased at a level that I don't think I'd ever seen before in the contact center space. And so I give a lot of kudos to the telcos. You can imagine a world in which the telcos become so good at that you actually sell that as a service to your B2B companies, because they will never get to the scale or the number of calls you all get or the investment you all get. And you could leverage that as a revenue generating opportunity. And then the second thing is AI infrastructure. The telcos also have a level of investment and capital expenditure in the infrastructure that many companies just can't afford at that level. You can rent space, invest for the future in terms of capital expenditure, and rent out the capacity you don't need to your customers. Again, a little bit further out there, but those are conversations that telcos are having. And so with all that, if I take what we've heard from the last hundreds and hundreds of client conversations, work we see in the telco space, I want to leave you with 6 learnings. And I try to take this page and update it every 6 or 8 weeks. It's an evolving page that's always kind of changing given the dynamics of the industry. And some of these I already hit on, which is the very first one is start with a big, bold business opportunity. Don't do tech for tech's sake. Too many times I hear people saying, we got to start this GenAI thing because everyone's asking me about it. And I say, well, what's the business problem we're trying to solve? And let's understand the way AI and GenAI and digital play to help solve the problem. The second thing is it's not just the what. So I love these roadmaps that people always create on, here's the roadmap in terms of the use cases we go after. Absolutely critical. The how is just as important, if not more important. How you go build the models, how you get people involved, how you think about change management is just as important as where you play. The third I refer to as speed as a strategy, which is at the end of the day, this is a learning journey. If anyone comes and tells you they know exactly what's going to happen in terms of GenAI, AI, the next 3 technologies that are going to come along, the change that it's going to require, the impact you're going to see, the investment that's going to be needed, they're just probably not telling you the truth because we're all learning. And so are our clients. And so as you think about speed as a strategy, the faster you can get going, learn, and then incorporate those learnings, those organizations we continuously seeing being 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of their competition. The partnership ecosystem is critical. I talked about it, but what's really a learning is that not just creating the partnership, but governing the partnership. It's super, super hard to manage all these players, and how you govern and have them all focus on solving your business problem versus their own incentives is not trivial. Redesign processes and change management, I spoke about. It's all about scaling and adoption. Without that, it's not real value. And then the last thing I talk about is play offense when it comes to challenges. So at some point, every CFO is going to say, show me the money. Where's the value? Where's the value creation that you all promised? And so any of the challenges you see with HR, legal, finance, solve those on the front end, not the back end. Be proactive that says, if this isn't going to work, why is it not going to work? And then how do we put in the mitigating steps ahead of time? So I know that was a super high level flyby at 10,000 feet. There's one more page, it's not coming up. There's 2 other sessions we have later today that if you're interested in these topics, there is one that's going to focus on how to become an AI native and how to use AI to rewire your telcos. Thank you. And there we're going to have a special guest, the Verizon Chief Data and AI Officer is going to join us for that conversation. And then there's a second one around the role of telcos in the AI value chain. So thank you guys for your time, and hope you have a great rest of your summit.
Quick question. One of the things I haven't heard you talk about in your material, and maybe in your book, is around knowledge graphs. And you did kind of hint on the fact that there's a lot of data hoarding going on. Maybe you can comment for the audience, any experience you have there. This is where you get domain expertise. I mean, telco is very domain specific. So how do you inject that into the organization at the same time deal with some of the data hoarding?
Yeah, listen, I think this is one of the critical things, right? Again, it comes down to governance and leadership around getting that. I'm not a fan of is building big data lakes and getting every piece of data invested into it, but getting data, what we call data products, like solving a specific business problem, and then creating the data products around solving that specific problem, I think starts to get organizations to build data products that are solving problems along the way. And then you're building your data sets over time, getting data from across the organization. I think long gone are the days of, trust me, we're going to build this amazing data lake over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be remarkable. And people invested hundreds of millions of dollars that didn't really turn into much.
Yeah. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you.